Good morning, good afternoon, hello. A very warm welcome to everyone that's joined, and welcome to our webinar on skills-based workforce in the Gen AI era. We're very pleased and excited to be with you today, and thanks for joining us. We're excited to explore a number of topics. There's a powerful shift happening around us in terms of skills and skills-based organizations. So during the next 60 minutes, we'll cover a number of key topics because we all know that in a world where the pace of change continues to accelerate around us, where traditional job roles are evolving rapidly, and instead of focusing on job titles, degrees, and more traditional work, leading organizations are now prioritizing skills as a competitive advantage. So it's more about what people can do, not just what they've done. As far as our agenda, we have 4 exciting topics to go through. Initially, we'll present our perspective, our point of view in terms of how we work with clients and in facing that skills challenge. We'll also have a keynote in terms of a hot topic around Gen AI and the impact of Gen AI for managers and from a skills perspective. We'll then have an exciting panel discussion. We have some experts from both Capgemini, from client organizations that are on that journey today, and they'll share with you some of their experiences, some of their insights, and some of their recommendations in terms of how to navigate that journey. And then we'll conclude with a call to action. We were also very interested, very curious to hear from you in terms of why you might have joined us this morning. So we wanted to actually share a poll where we ask you in terms of what are your key skills challenges. So we'll bring up that poll for you to answer one. Let's look at why people have joined us. Great. I can already see there's a lot of responses. Technology, I think, no big surprise there in terms of that being a critical element around this topic and how we leverage and integrate technology on this journey. But actually, the results are quite spread. So I can see that people have looked at that how to navigate a world where skills are rapidly changing. The people element in terms of culture and change and how we embrace a skills-first approach is also a topical answer. So it's good. We have a strong spread, and we'll try to cover these topics in our panel discussion as well as through the different presentations. But next, I'd like to hand over to Mark Howarth. Mark, if you could introduce yourself and then present our point of view as far as skills and skills-based organisations.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Nicholas. I'm Mark Howarth. I'm based here in the UK, Vice President for Capgemini, and I lead on our HR transformation and also skills-based organisation work. So working with perhaps many of you other clients, and in particular looking at research as well in this field. So it's a big topic, and I've got 10 minutes. So it will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, relatively high level. And as we go through today's webinar, there'll be more and more kind of specific insights from clients themselves, from Capgemini and what we're doing. But it's important to present that context around trends. Why is this important? Why is this trending globally, and what are those kind of macro level drivers, and effectively what can you do as organizations? So if we move on to the next slide. So I wanted to make this a little bit personal, and I think it should be. We talk about this almost somewhat theoretically and philosophically, And sometimes you can lose the thread of how is this actually going to affect me in the day to day. So that's actually a picture of my son and daughter and my wife. And I reflect on this, of how this will all impact their lives. Those macro level trends that Nicholas mentioned, how the world of work is changing, what that will mean for skills. And ultimately, it will mean changes in day to day. Things like education will change. Perhaps when we talk about this topic, we look at it a little bit negatively, and it can feel like the apocalypse is coming. But actually, as I talk through some of the research, there is as much around how new jobs are going to be added, but also how being human is in demand. So those qualities that are unique about being human: creativity, curiosity, collaboration, the character of us as individuals, our resilience, our caring, empathy. These are actually things that are difficult to replicate, even with the new technology coming through like AI, and are the most durable skills that are really in demand and actually going to help people and workforces flourish. So worth bearing in mind, and worth kind of thinking about that positiveness from the outset, and also worth reflecting as I go through and as you listen to other presenters. What is it you're doing as an individual, perhaps for yourself, also for your workforce, to help others adapt in this new environment where skills are more rapidly changing? And how are you helping others to adopt new technology, upskill, reskill, think about the skills that they'll need for the future as well? Because it really is affecting people right now, and largely it can be a really positive trend that's happening out there. If we move on to the next slide, we work with the World Economic Forum a lot on this topic, and it's really useful for us, and we can share those insights with clients. Obviously, we're there kind of every day working hand in hand with clients, and it's often difficult to take a step back and think about the macroeconomic trends that are happening and try to associate those with what changes are happening in the workplace, perhaps even at a project level. How does that impact some of the projects that we're working on? But really, really important, we work with the World Economic Forum consecutively at Davos, presenting on different topics, and more about the future of work, future of jobs, and future of skills. So we're moving beyond just the kind of theoretical trends, and actually helping to provide talent guidebooks, toolkits, those sort of things. So we can share some of those, and they're available online, but we're really turning those into things that can actually be used. And as we talk about this topic, we'll talk more and more about skills-based organizations. And I think this is where, we do a lot of work with the World Economic Forum, thinking about, there are those macro level trends. The world is changing, sectors are changing, and in response, skills need to change. But then how can organizations adapt to that? And that's where we're working collectively together. And we'll present some of those insights as we move through these slides, and you'll hear that from some of the other presenters. So if we move on to the next slide. So what is changing? Because you'll hear this topic a lot. It's probably hard to move away from it if you're clicking around LinkedIn, that skills are trending, but why? What's new? What are those drivers that are boosting that change? You'll also find it difficult to move away from hearing about AI. And that is one of the new technology changes that are coming through, but so are many others. There are changes in biotechnology, in robotics, in human augmentation, in quantum computing, all of these kind of coming at once and really changing how we work, how we get work done. And actually how we utilize humans within the workforce, and how we will work with technology into the future. And all of this is throwing up, the need for particularly new technical skills. And each year, those technical skills coming in demand and almost having a shorter half-life, as people need to learn them, use them, and actually then move on to the next skill. If you look at the US last year, the number one top trending job was a prompt engineer. This year, it's not even in the top 10. So last year, very much in demand. And this year, because of the changes in technology, as we're moving from kind of GenAI into more agentic AI, we're seeing, even on the technical level, people training and reskilling themselves and then needing to do the same, the next year. So it's throwing up a need for workforces and individuals to continue to think about training, retraining, looking and forecasting the skills they'll need for the future. I think the second topic, also hard to move away from, which really is around protectionism, also wars that are breaking out as well, which are making changes. So the number of trade restrictions has doubled since 2015. And what that has meant is lots of organizations are looking actually for the first time at reshoring and moving work back onshore, where, in particular around manufacturing, a lot of that work was moved overseas. And then that's creating a new demand around different skills that might not have existed. And then in terms of that global talent pool, it is more restrictive. It's more difficult to source talent due to those restrictions, particularly in the UK where we have Brexit. You can see that happening, that certain skills disappeared or became more difficult to source. So again, a real challenge for organizations thinking very dynamically around the market and mapping that talent intelligence. Where can I find skills? How are skills going to be changing? Really, really important. There's a connection then to that third topic around economic uncertainty. With restrictions, with uncertainty in the political environment, there has been more economic uncertainty. And coming out of COVID, there is relatively slow growth. In some ways, there's a nice intersection between, AI and new technology that, if harnessed, can create great productivity and efficiencies. And at the same time, organizations are looking at cost cutting. So, we are seeing in the market a lot of not just proof of concepts around this technology, but it being scaled and that really changing the composition of the workforce and the type of work that's being done. So that uncertainty is creating actually some real innovation. Demographic shift, and there's multiple. I'll zoom into generation because this is having quite a big impact. For some generations, like the baby boomer generation, it's a great time. Lots of those will be retiring, and actually retiring earlier than expected for many. So again, looking at some of the US data, the average age of retirement is 61. So it's actually gone down. What that means globally is the working population, the percentage of people who are able to work or will be working will reduce. So globally, that will go from 67% to 59% by 2050. So far fewer of the population will actually be working. And effectively, looking again for talent, skills will become more difficult, will become more competitive, and organizations have a heightened awareness of that, as well of thinking about people with knowledge and skills are leaving. How do we make sure that we're reskilling, upskilling the workforce, and that all of that knowledge is being retained? And then the last point I'll just talk about briefly is on the green transition, which is throwing up, a new demand for skills, particularly with new types of renewable technology that's coming in. And again, throwing up a greater need to look at that balance of skills in the workforce with green energy. Let me move on to the next slide. So this will focus on, well, what skills are changing. And there's a couple of insights here. I mean, you can see, and the data actually comes from the World Economic Forum. One of the key insights is across 5 years, those skills that are in high demand aren't the same skills. So again, the rate at which skills are changing is increasing. But the other trend to point out here is the types of skills, which I mentioned at the start. Yes, organizations really need to reflect on the type of technical skills that are needed, and lots of those will be in demand because of new technology. But actually, how can they reinforce and upskill on the more durable skills, the kind of human qualities that I mentioned at the start: creativity, resilience, flexibility, agility. Those are in demand and becoming really, really key for people to be able to lifelong learn, be able to adapt quickly, be able to move on from their current role project. Because obviously the world of work, as Nicholas mentioned, is going from kind of fixed jobs and positions to more fragmented and more fluid. That's requiring people to reskill, rethink about their own future, and in doing that, move on to new pieces of work and projects. Let's move on to the next slide. So how can organizations really get a grip on all of this? So world of work is changing, economics are changing, new skills are needed, and the rate at which that's happening even faster. So one of the key ways of making sure that you as within your organization have some sense of control, grip, foresight of this is starting to build that foundation of logging, systematizing skills that actually exist within the organization, and making sure as easy as possible for an employee, their skills are tracked. They know what skills they have. They know what skills are actually in demand and what type of work is in demand, and they know how to reskill and upskill themselves. And there's a number of new technology that's coming in to help employees and the workforce infer the skills they have, so certainly make it easier, and also use that data to inform matching people and skills to different projects and move people around the organization much quicker. And this approach we're calling skills-based organization, because rather than the organization being centered around jobs and kind of fixed structures, as we can see, organizations are moving much more fluidly into projects with more agility, where teams are formed very quickly around skills that are needed for that piece of work. And actually a fragmentation of people's time, where they're spending some of their time on one project with a certain skill needed and some of the rest of their time on another project, or even in between companies, where we're seeing people spending parts of their time working for one company or one client and having multiple roles actually at the same time. I'll leave you with the last slide, which kind of summarizes those trends. Lots of different statistics on here, which again, difficult to cover all of this in a short period. I think the important thing to reflect on is how are you personally adapting to this new environment in terms of the skills that you have, in terms of upskilling yourself on new technology. How are you helping your organization in terms of the technology that's needed, those foundations that's needed, changes in ways of working? And then the last question is, how are you helping others within the workforce upskill themselves? Because all this technology is great, but it only has impact if it's adopted. And this is where I can naturally hand over to Gabriele, who will talk through how to help particularly line managers and people managers make best use of that technology, very specifically focusing on generative AI.
Great, thanks very much, Mark. And that's, as you say, is a great segue into the next section. One thing that I forgot to mention at the very start was that if you have questions that you'd like to ask any of the presenters or like to push towards our panel discussion, then please use the Q&A button on the right of your screen. We have a team in the background who will answer as many of those questions as we can, and if we have time, we'll present them to some of the speakers and panelists. But with that said, I'll hand over to Gabriela.
Thank you, Nick, for having me and the opportunity to share insights about our book. So I'm Gabriele Rosani, I'm director of Management Lab, and I'm also the author, together with Elisa Fari, of this book that you see. It's a practical guide to generative AI for managers, recently published by the Harvard Business Review Press. So this book helps managers to embrace the right mindset and build the skills that are needed to unlock value using generative AI, not just in terms of productivity, but also in terms of creativity and better thinking. And before we talk about the skills that are needed to uh, interact, I think it's important to make this point. So how do managers interact with generative AI? And there are two different ways to do it. So the most common way is to interact, to use the machine as a tool, as a productivity assistant. So you ask AI to do something like summarizing a document or writing the draft of an email. So you simply prompt and wait. So you delegate, you want efficiency, you want to go fast. But there is also another way to interact with this technology, is to see it as a thought partner, as a collaborator, as a sparring partner. So you don't simply ask and wait, but you enter into a dialogue, into a conversation. So you talk with AI because you want to reflect, you want to ponder, you want to think about some choices, you want to reflect, you want to consider different perspectives, you want to be challenged. So this is a different way to interact with the machine, where you don't just want to be fast, but you want quality, depth, and also some lateral thinking, and also some challenge. For example, when you do decision making or problem solving or strategic thinking. And today, most of the narrative about generative AI is on the productivity side. Okay, which is good, but there is an untapped potential, and only few people see it. So to use the machine really to unlock value and to go into a conversation, into mutual questioning and challenging, and sort of a back and forth that you create value. So to most people, actually, this way of interacting with the technology doesn't come naturally. And so that's why it requires a new mindset. So to go from the old mindset to a new way to interact with the technology, and also new skills and new behaviors. So if we move to the next slide, we see the skills. What are the skills that are needed to interact with Gen AI more as a thought partner, and to go beyond productivity, and to move more on the creativity, on the thinking side? So you see three layers here. Let's start from the superficial layer, which is about prompting. And since the interaction with the machine is via a prompt, either text or voice, it might seem obvious that people need to learn how to prompt effectively. That's why there are so many trainings and courses on prompting, because it's sort of the language of this interaction. But actually, to prompt well, you need to master more fundamental skills. Okay, and so we move to the second layer here. What are these skills? First of all, the art of asking good questions, because the value is in the human question and not on the AI answer. So it's the combination. If you ask a generic question, you get generic answer. So you need to be smart and able to really ask good questions and nurture a conversation. And actually, many managers told us, they realize that they're not that good at asking questions. Maybe they're good at giving answers, but not really at so that they at articulating question, more into sort of a Socratic approach with the technology, because it doesn't come naturally. So the second point is about nurturing the dialogue with the machine. So you need to be active. You need to contribute to this conversation, to collaborate into the dialogue, brief the machine, give feedback, provide context continuously along the dialogue. So you guide the conversation. So you need to master the conversation. And again, this is something that interacting with the tool to many people does not come naturally. And then we have the need of critical thinking, because at the end, in this conversation with AI, you need to check, you need to validate, you need to accept what AI suggests you. So you need to exercise your critical thinking so that the co-created output is valid and relevant and reliable for your specific situation. So you need this validation and critical thinking. And to do that, we move to the third layer, which is having judgment, because this technology is different from other technologies. So this technologies is probabilistic by nature. And so we need to be aware that there might be some traps because it's probabilistic. And so we need to exercise our judgment as individuals, because, there are some policies, some rules, but they are not enough. We need to make our call, our judgment, uh, as the technology is not deterministic. And that's why it's so important to nurture the judgment. What does it mean? The judgment means um, contextual knowledge, emotional intelligence, nuances, because AI is very smart but cannot read the room, cannot read the corridor. There are many tacit things that are not explicit in the data, intangible or emotional, even political things sometimes in the team's dynamic in company dynamics. And so that's why you need to double down on judgment, but not just on the individual judgment, but also on the collective judgment. Because when you use AI one-to-one, there might be some traps. And if you enlarge this sort of interaction with other teammates, other colleagues, so you add this diversity component and more domains, more knowledge, more challenge, more judgment. And so the importance of using it not just one-to-one, but also opening up the use of AI in group settings, like in workshops or in sessions where more people are around the table using AI. And this will make this collective judgment better, not only in terms of managing the potential traps that are related intrinsic to AI, but also having better quality in the interaction and in thinking together with the machine to extract value. So the role of managers is very important, also to leading by example, showing their teams how you can use AI as a partner, as a collaborative a co-thinker, and not just as an executioner, and what are the skills, how you need to do it. Okay, so it's important that managers do it first themselves in first person, and then they share their learnings with their teams, and they discuss and they encourage their teams to do the same. So leading by example is very important, because here it's not just a matter of a new tool, it's a matter of a new way to work, blended humans plus AI. And we are in this phase, so to discover how to work together. I will now give it back to Nicholas.
Perfect. Thanks, Gabriella. And now at this point, then, very pleased to welcome some others into the panel discussion. You just heard from Gabriella, but also would welcome both Natalie and Matilda to the stage. And what we'll do here, we'll have a conversation. What we want to try and do is cover some of the key themes, some of the key challenges, because I think with Gabriella, Natalie, and Matilda, we'll get their experiences and their insights. But first of all, if I start with you, Matilda, could you just give a short introduction of who you are?
Yes, thank you so much, Nicolas. So, hello everyone. My name is Mathilde Cosso. I am the HR director from Forvis Mazar. So we are an auditing and consulting firm, one of the international leaders, and I'm in charge of the all HR topic for France. So we are 6,000 people. And I'm in charge. I'm working about a new business model, new HR business model, in order to help the organization to lead the transformation. So I'm working on skills-based organization and very happy to share it with you.
Fantastic. And Natalie, if you could do the same.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Natalie. I'm the Chief Talent and Learning Officer for Capgemini. And skills-based workforce transformation has been probably the biggest challenge on my plate over the last 4 years that I've been in this role. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some learnings and getting into a discussion with you all.
Perfect. So what I wanted to do is trying to cover 3 key themes. So first of all, the first theme that wanted to start the conversation around was sort of how we navigate a world where skills are rapidly changing. And to you, Natalie, the first questions is how both on your experience or what's your perspective in terms of how you prioritize skills and define which skills are going to be prioritized and critical for business success.
Yeah, maybe 2 words of context, which will influence my contributions to the panel as we're discussing this. So Capgemini is a skills business. So skills are what we do. They are our capital, and therefore the agility in which we are able to adjust to those skills volatilities, which we've just talked about in the previous contributions, are absolutely vital to our business success. So therefore, it's a business essential for us to respond, to this level of volatility that we're seeing. And given of what we do, we are advising our clients through the digital transformation in their respective industries. It means we need to be ahead of the game. So we can't afford to just respond. We have to actually, figure out what's around the corner. So to your question, how do we do that? For us, there are 2 skills value chains that we need to drive. So one is a more responsive one. So we need to obviously detect what's happening in the market. So this is a workforce planning exercise where we need to detect, what do our clients require, and then we need to be very quick in responding. That for us is not sufficient because of the requirement of being ahead. So we also need to work with our thought leaders in the business, of which we have many. Gabriele is one of them, and we have others, where we need to think forward and think ahead of what do these technology transformations and challenges and disruptions mean for what we believe our clients will need in 6 to 12 months time. And then my team in our university, when we look at the topic of AI, we have an AI campus, work very closely with those thought leaders to convert that into learning and development content. So for the topic of AI, for example, we had to train 110,000 people within 3 months last year. So it's a volume machine for us as a business that we're running there. It's not easy. Keeps us on our toes.
Good. And then it was something that both actually Mark and Gabriele, you touched upon in your previous presentations, but I wanted to direct the question to you, Matilda. In terms of that balance between technical skills and human skills, often referred to as soft skills. How do you strike that balance in terms of where you place the emphasis?
If I'm honest, it's quite natural. In fact, as Natalie said, at Forvis Mazars, we are a skills business too, because we sell only time of our consultants. And by the past, before AI and other technologies, of course, art skills were the key, because without art skills, our consultant, our auditors couldn't do the task we asked them. But thanks to AI and other technology, now we can give the priority to soft skills, because they have now tools to help them to do the task we needed art skills. And so natural now it was for us a good time to work about new roles, all the new contribution, our expectation about our employees. And when we discussed with them, thanks to AI, now the added value they can give to our organization is quite only dedicated about human value. So of course, critical thinking, it was a key soft skills already by the past, because without critical thinking, we can't use AI. But today, empathy, trusting relationship, social intelligence, how to work efficiently, it was already important, but nobody can have all the skills. And the accent was on the technical skills. And now, thanks to new technology, we can push the light on soft skills. And for example, during the recruitment process, we know when we worked on the contributions, we work on our new architecture, and now maybe 70% of the skills are soft skills, because the proportion of hard skills is very smaller than by the past. And we develop a lot of new training programs, and 50% of our training programs are dedicated to soft skills. It was not the case 20 years ago, not at all. And during the recruitment, now we want to certificate the skills. So we are working with a platform. We have one dedicated to hard skills and one dedicated to soft skills, which is Assess First, which quite famous. So it's more than 50% of our work today is dedicated to assess the soft skills, which is a real added value of our consultant in the way we address the needs of our clients.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective in terms of that shift.
Exactly.
Towards, the more human side of this type of change. And then Gabriella, around that same theme, and I think partially you did cover it in your keynote as well, but again, difficult to talk around this topic without mentioning GenAI. What do you think are the most significant challenges that organizations faced in terms of navigating a world in which their employees are equipped with GenAI as you say, as a partner, as a collaborator in their way of working?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. So the vast majority of people still use this technology as a tool, as a productivity assistant, but not that many see the potential or how to use it more in a collaborative way, more as a thought partner, as I mentioned. So I think it's a mindset shift that is needed in the way we look at the technology. And okay, it's fine to give access, to give licenses, and to do some trainings, but it's not enough, because this technology is different. And so we need to help the people shift their mindset, from a tool to a collaborator. And it's simple to say, but not to make it happen, because it doesn't come naturally to most people. We have seen this. There are some exceptions, some people who do it naturally, but to most people it doesn't come naturally. So we need to help them shift and see what is possible, and show how it is possible, and make it a habit. And so to try to think AI first, it's not easy. So that's why I say, rather than prompting skills, which it's important, but before that you need to have this shift, and the role of managers in helping the people to do this shift. But first of all, they need to do themselves if they want to be credible and showcasing this to their teams.
I'm going to segue into the next theme. What I will mention as well is if you have a question that you'd like to ask the panel, then feel free to share it in the chat, and we can then put them on the spot and see if they can answer the questions that you ask. But sort of the next theme that I wanted to cover, and actually was the top answer in our poll, and I can relate to this one, was the question around technology, and how we integrate and leverage technology. And that can be, specific technology like GenAI, but also then in terms of our HR platforms, our HR technology, and everything else that is then sort of a key facilitator in becoming skills oriented in organizations. Gabriella, to you again. I think, of course, the GenAI topic. If you've got any sort of good examples of where GenAI or any other technology for that matter has been leveraged to enhance sort of skills and sort of talent development within an organization.
Yeah, but I like this. So far we talk about the skills for AI, and now as a mirror we can talk about AI for skills. Okay, so yes, in our research and in our book there are a few examples on how real managers are using AI to build their own skills, but also to help their teams in skill buildings. I can mention a couple of examples. The first example is about self-reflection. So a manager talking with the AI as a thought partner and having a self-reflection about the leadership style. And so you have to imagine a sort of a conversation, using AI more like an executive coach in a sense. So the manager try to have a self-reflection about leadership style, referring to the most established leadership frameworks, and try to see what are the tips, what are the reference in the literature, and have it sort of this sort of coach experience with the machine to contextualize and to own situation, and this really is of help. So this is a concrete example of a manager leveraging the technology to self-reflect. Then there is another example that we found. We found a manager having a problem of promoting a sort of a mindset shift within his team. So going from a local function to a more global and cross-divisional function. So it needs a new way of doing work. And so it tried to shape this change within the team in the traditional way. And then it didn't work very well. And so they said, let's try to use GenAI and helping the people shift the mindset. And so they put together this sort of a dialogue. And so the people could go through this dialogue with AI, thinking about what does it mean? So what's the mindset shift? What are the elements? And they sort of reflect with GenAI about these elements, and then how to turn these abstract elements into concrete behaviors that can apply to my specific situation. So can I have some tips, some example? How can I do this shift in practice? So you see how they, using GenAI, they manage to understand what is the shift, and then how to make it in the real in their real situation, with some tips and some also some references to authoritative approaches to do this. So these are examples of how managers are leveraging AI to let's say build new skills or new ways of thinking.
Next question, and I'd like actually both Natalie and Matilda your perspective on this question. Firstly, to you, Natalie, because I think actually you referred to some elements of this, but I think a common challenge or a common dilemma is that balance between sort of more operational aspects of sort of workforce management, operational, the near-term future, with then a more strategic outlook in terms of the longer term and kind of how we navigate sort of skill development and our workforce needs. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of sort of your experiences of facing that challenge and how potentially we have in Capgemini?
Yeah. Yes, and that operationalizing this has really been one of the biggest challenges. So for us, when I look at the operational value chain, it starts with the market need, the client need, and then in our business, we need to staff against a very bespoke client need. And we are no longer staffing based on a role that someone holds. We need to staff based on the skills that client requires. And that is sort of very simple and easy to say, but how do you create the operating model, behind being able to do that? And in our world, we have a staffing technology. So building the bridge to the technology topic here. So we have a staffing technology that is now skills-based, where we are holding the intelligence of the skills that every employee in our organization has. And there is a lot of plumbing work required to make sure that is an accurate picture, and all the work that's required to make sure that's valid. So that's a piece of technology that drives the operational value chain of skills. And then we have the more strategic, longer term picture, where we need to build skills for the future beyond, the 6-9 months client demand that we can see coming in. And that is driven by through our HR technology. So we have a different technology here, also skills-based, but it's not the same. Then we have a piece of learning technology that sits in between, because our learning technology needs to enable both the skill building that we require to meet our client needs, and it also needs to build the skills, for the longer term. So I believe all of us have a tech stack, and I think that's sort of what I can see in exchanging with lots of organizations seems to be the need of the hour. How do you create the plumbing to have that skills intelligence in different systems synced with each other to meet both the operational needs and the more strategic needs at the same time in sync? So that, I think, is something that we we're getting there. We have a way of doing it now. Took us a couple of years to do.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it was the top answer in our poll, at least in terms of that question about how we integrate and leverage technology. And it sounds like in your response that's probably, you also recognise that as a key challenge in Capgemini's own journey in becoming skills oriented as well.
Yeah.
Matilda, the same question to you. And anything you'd like to add?
I have quite the same answer. So we started after Capgemini, so maybe I have more, less experience to share. But skills-based organization is not only a topic of skills architecture. And we already talked a lot about skills, but now it's completely a new model. I'm convinced it's the organizational model of the future. And in our kind of industry, it's a necessity. And it's not an HR topic for me. It's a business topic. We need to speak skills with candidates, of course, but with our clients, with the finance, because this model has consequences on prices, on rentability, etc., etc. And all our system are not deal with the skills, or are not completely think to take this as a central topic. So, for example, we started to move forward step by step, and I think it's like we are doing a research, because the first skills-based organization model are the pioneers for this future model. So, for example, at the beginning, we need a marketplace to manage all the skills. So it's like an HR tool where we can manage and identify all the skills. We have, of course, on the market, there are a lot of workforce planning solutions. So it can help us to manage the skills, but I think it's just the beginning, because after we need to work on the finance tool, on clients tool, everything. It's a completely new model, and we have not the visibility. We need to work with agility, and we will discover after the new topics. As Natalie, I think maybe in 5 years I will be much more advanced, but I know it's a huge transformation, and we have not all the tools on the market. And if I can share, in France, the social law is not organized around skills, but about other necessities. So it's really difficult to work with our local compliance and the regulation and build this new model, which is changing everything. So for the moment, yes, we choose one tool and then after another one. So it's not finished. And the most difficult maybe thing is to onboard and to engage all our employees, because we cannot dress or design exactly the final model because we don't know everything. So we need to convince them to say it's a good and it's a really important move to do, but we have not all the answers today. So they must feel confident and completely convinced. That's why, but I know it's another question, the leadership and the sponsoring and the top management is so crucial.
That's actually a fantastic segue. I know that we've had a few questions come in on the Q&A, so I actually want to cover some of those. But I think one other key topic that you just mentioned, Matilda, is sort of we spoke about in the poll again, culture and adoption, and maybe you can start by answering this question: is kind of what role does leadership play, and what's your experience in terms of how important that is? I know you touched upon it, but could you expand on that?
For me, it changed everything. As an HR professional, as I was already convinced that this move is a necessity and I think a very important social issue to answer all our employees' expectations about attractivity, about purpose, about their career development, etc. But in fact, it's a business need for me, opportunity at first. And we need to convince our executive team. And I am lucky. I can say at Forvis Mazars it's the case, and it's our business leader who are convinced when they are talking with their clients, when they address the priority, they are convinced it's a skills topic. And now our most strategic asset is the skills of our employees, of our consultants. And so they are completely open-minded. But after, we need to lead the transformation, but it's easier to explain our people. It's not an HR dream or yes, but it's a business necessity. So they can talk about that on every meetings with all our partners in order to help us. And they are the first to try to develop themselves on a skills perspective. So we are doing assessment for all our partners too. And it's a completely shift because by the past, when you are arrived at this level, you know everything. And we know that in key positions, they need to develop their own skills too, day after day, to be the best professional. So in using the technology at first players and in supporting our messages with a client perspective, I think it's a first step to help us to do that.
Perfect, thank you. I wanted to tackle one of the questions that we've seen come in the Q&A, and I'll say the question and feel free to shout if who would like to answer it. One question that we received was, what would you say was the key foundational building block in starting this journey and becoming skills oriented or skills based? Is there one of you that would like to, and it's probably a combination of things, but is there someone that would like to answer that question?
Yeah, I've got a view on what the keys were for us, but I do believe that this is a bespoke journey for everyone. But I think the building block for us was to start with painting the picture. Like Mathilde said, there are so many component pieces to ultimately making this a reality on the organization. So we started with drawing that future picture out. What are all the parts of this skills engine that ultimately will need to be transformed for all of this to work? And then we needed to decide where to start, because we can't do everything at once. And Mathis, I think the question came from you, and you put it in your brackets here. The center of this engine room is a skills taxonomy, ontology, whatever. You use some framework that will allow the organization to build the connections to a common version of the truth, and that had to be a skills ontology. The moment you then plug different technologies in, that already creates the first challenge, because not all of the technologies 2 years ago, when we started to really operationalize, were ready to consume the same ontology. So we had a couple of years where we really had to figure out a pragmatic workaround for the fact that, from a technology perspective, not all elements were ready to link into the same ontology. I think this is becoming easier because now we have technology that is able to sync better. And I think that's also part of my learning. It was such a mission to stay on top of where are the different technology providers going in terms of their roadmap, in terms of their strategy to ultimately become compatible with each other. And are we able to wait for that, or do we need to build manual workarounds whilst we wait? So that, I think, was one of the biggest challenges, is judging where do we start, where do we wait because the technology isn't ready, and how then ultimately is everything going to join in its flight path for this integrated picture to land. And we started, actually, to one of the other questions in the chat, we started with building the mindset. So we transformed the way we manage performance and growth and enable people managers, because we can say people managers need to do all those things, but we also know from 20 years or 30 years of experience that it's too much to ask of people managers, to carry this. So we need to build the infrastructure, the nudging, the systems for people managers to do what they need to do in this whole journey.
Perfect. Thanks very much for sharing, Natalie. Unfortunately, time is up. We have to wrap up the session, but thanks all of the panelists for sharing your experiences, your insights, your perspectives on this topic. I'd like to now hand over to Madeline, who will wrap up the session for us.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks to our fantastic panel today. My name is Madeline. I lead our workforce and org team from Capgemini out of Singapore. Really happy to give us a quick wrap up today. And we are very happy to see all of our questions coming through from you in the chat. And we will try our best to get back to you with answers, and stay tuned for a part 2 as we continue our skilling conversation. So in summary, we really talked about 3 key areas of skilling today. The first one was all about how we can build and update our skills in this digital and AI age. So key takeaway for you is to remember to start with that clear vision whilst focusing on short-term goals and plans, and keep an eye on not only the hard skills, we're all trying to upskill in GenAI, for example, but also remember those soft skills, which are equally important. The second area that we talked about was technology. It came across as our key poll insight as well. We're all trying to figure out how we can best integrate technology into our skills-based journey. Key takeaway for you is to remember to make use of what you have, and always integrate that skills orientation into your people practices as well across the toolset technology base that you already have. And finally, and arguably most importantly, we talked about culture and mindset when we're all becoming a skills-first company. It's very important to have leadership aligned and committed. Many of you on the call today are leaders, so we all play a very strong role in this mindset shift. And it's important that we're all equipped to do so with skills-first perspectives and practices. Moving forward, in terms of next steps, we are really happy to have further conversations with you and can support you through your skilling journey. Some key accelerators we have is our maturity assessment. If you're not sure where you stand today, we have a tool that can help you baseline and set the path forward. A reminder on our thought leadership, we have a future of work out there and our partnership with the World Economic Forum talking about the rise of global digital jobs. And we have a lot of digital partnerships if you're interested to talk to us about that too, on tools that can help you accelerate your skilling journey. In terms of our team, so we have more than 1,000 team members across the globe working on skilling topics. You've heard from Nick today representing Sweden and Mark in the UK. We have Susanna in the US, Sylvia in Germany, Stephanie in France, and myself in Singapore. Please reach out to us if you'd like to have a further conversation. And last but not least, thank you so much for joining us. We would love your feedback. Feel free to scan this code to give us your feedback, and we'll put the link in our follow-up as well. Look out for our post-webinar email. You'll receive the link for today's webinar as a reference for you, and stay tuned for our next webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.